Hello, my name is Dr. Joe Wysocki. I'm the provost at Belmont Abbey College. Welcome to Conversatio, the podcast of Belmont Abbey College. Today we are very happy to have with us John Turrentine and Benjamin Trull, who are here as part of the Adeodatus conference, who wrote and directed, produced a play that will be performed at the end of this weekend called Passion's End. So thank you both for being here.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you for having us.
Well, first, why don't you just tell me a little bit, each of you, briefly about your background?
I grew up in Northern California, homeschool family, youngest of 5 boys. Got attracted to the theater from a very young age. There was a great local Shakespeare company that did a lot of teen stuff, and I got involved with that. And then I'm a graduate at Thomas Aquinas College. I've been working now, about to enter my 10th year in Catholic education, middle school and high school. I've been doing theater pretty much my whole life.
Right. What year did you graduate?
2016.
Okay. My wife went to TAC, 2007 though.
Oh,
so,
okay. One of my brothers was there.
Oh, good.
Catholic moment right there. I also was homeschooled. I'm from St. Louis, Missouri. I'm the middle of 7. And I also got involved in theater at a young age. My mom was our kind of homeschool co-op director. So I wound up being in all the plays. It's kind of all I did, I feel like, in high school was theater, one way or another. I also went to Thomas Aquinas College. I was a freshman when John was a senior. So John directed Taming of the Shrew when I was a freshman. He was a senior. So that was kind of our first theatrical intersection. And then I graduated in 2019, went to the Dominican House of Studies in D.C. to get my master's in theology, which I finished in 2021. And I just started teaching at a Catholic high school, St. Augustine, in Ventura, California. So we're kind of I'm one or two steps behind John quite frequently, it seems like, in life. But
Well, great. Well, without giving any spoiler alerts, so that people will you do this play in other venues, Passion's End? Or
that's our hope. This is the second venue we've had, and so we're hoping to, drum up a little more interest and keep performing it.
It's an incentive to do well this Saturday. So.
Well, great. Well, tell me a little bit, without giving spoiler alerts, about how the project came into being, and then maybe what you should feel comfortable telling us about the play itself.
Sure. Well, we reconnected. I moved out to California not long after finishing my master's, and I was working at Thomas Aquinas College in the office, and John was working at a school in the area, and we just reconnected over our mutual love of Kurosawa films. But we also reconnected over a love of theater, so we would do plays over the summer. And eventually we, in a fit of enthusiasm, volunteered to write a play for our summer theater group. And then as soon as we had done that, they're like, that's not going to happen. So, of course, egos bristled, and we were like, well, now we're going to do it.
You mean we can't do that?
And, the next day, we're like, why on earth did we say yes to that? But, then the promise was made. So we wrote a play then that summer, which was really fun. It was probably not one we'll ever do again, but it was an enjoyable first effort. But it did get the attention of Alex Lassard, a guy who runs Adeodatus, because his future son-in-law was in the play that we did. Nice. And he mentioned that he was looking for someone he wanted to commission a play as part of Adeodatus' cultural renewal element. And his future son-in-law said, hey, I know some guys.
Yeah, as a matter of fact.
So he reached out to us not too long after that. And since we were that first effort was fun because it was the sort of thing like I said, probably wouldn't do it again, but it was a good learning experience to realize, okay, we're good enough at this that we know we can see all the ways in which we could get better at it.
So we need another opportunity and write another play, and Alex Lassard steps in. So we wrote it, the fall of 2024?
Earlier, 2023. And finished it in January of last year.
And then this January, we performed it in California at the end of Adeodatus' Tolkien conference.
Yeah. Where it was pretty well received.
Yeah.
I mean, it was a fairly small audience. We did it in sort of the ballroom of an old hotel in downtown Pasadena. So it certainly had an atmosphere to it. Yeah. And it was kind of cool there was no real stage. So it was just a bunch of chairs, and then we kind of cleared a space. So it had a really intimate feeling, which, if you get the chance to see the play, suits it quite well. But, intimacy aside, we were really excited when we had the opportunity to perform it on an actual stage with seats that don't move. So we're pretty excited to bring it to a larger audience and hopefully future audiences too.
That's great. Tell me about what it's like to write with a partner. I know one of our director of theater, former director of theater here, had a play. He wrote plays. We had a writing partner. I've seen that new Amazon Beatles, that 14-hour thing where the Abbey Road productions where they're sitting there kind of writing together. I mean, what is that like to, not be the sole author of something?
Weird.
What is the process like?
It is weird, but it's also, I think for us, it works well for the two of us for a number of reasons. One, we have somebody to be accountable to.
Mm-hmm.
So if you say, I'm going to write the rest of this scene tonight, and tomorrow morning it's not done, the other guy knows.
Yeah, sure.
So that's one thing. And then the other thing I find is we're about 90% of the time initially on the same page.
Okay.
And so we have conflict about 10% of the time. And what we found is Ben's right half of the time, and I'm right half of the time.
Mm-hmm.
And so far, we've been, we'll argue about things, but we recognize when we're wrong.
Mm-hmm.
And it ends up being the case mostly that it's better than if one of us was just doing it, because it has to pass through the lines, the plot points, the characters, all those things have to pass through two sets of eyes, and we both have to say, yeah, we're okay with this. Yeah. So we're holding ourselves, I think, to a higher standard of excellence, because you write something and you can't just be fond of it. Yeah. He has to like it too.
And it's also, I think, especially for people from our kind of more intellectual background, it's so easy to be cerebral. I mean, we both went to TAC, and that's at least the reputation that TAC has, which is not entirely unwarranted. And I say that with love.
Yeah.
But being a fairly cerebral person, it'd be very easy to write something if you're just writing on your own, and it's so you say, I don't know, and you kind of think, okay, this is pretty good, but in reality, it just kind of turns into a monologue. Mm-hmm. So, especially for a play in which dialogue is such an essential part of the theatrical experience, actually having two people there saying, nah, this seems too much like, this is just too you, right? And it needs to be the character. Mm-hmm. So kind of getting it out of any one person's head and kind of getting it onto a shared space, it already kind of preempts that problem, which I think a lot of plays can be too talky. And I think that, not to say that we don't write talky plays, we write pretty wordy plays, but at least it's a way to kind of prevent that from taking over. And, like you said, kind of holding accountable for the integrity of the characters. Like, no, okay, your voice is becoming too dominant. We need to tone it back a little.
I think the other thing, when we wrote our first play together, huge sections of the first draft were taken from, we would just hit or record on our phone and just improvise a scene. And that provided the basis for the first draft of large sections of the first draft of our first play.
Which is why it wound up being so wordy.
Yeah. Right. But that's helped keep realistic dialogue, I think, because it really is, ultimately, it's not just out of nowhere from your brain alone, this is what people sound like when they talk. It is often pretty grounded in real conversations. And then the other thing too is we find it's so easy to make characters stereotypes if you don't have someone else saying, no, that's just on the nose. You got it. So we found, especially with Passion's End, because we were writing, which we'll give a summary, I suspect, in just a minute. Yeah. We're writing about things that we're very familiar with. And so the characters could easily have just been people that we knew, or, on the other extreme, one-dimensional stereotypes. And so having another person to help you view your own characters and make sure you're doing them justice is really helpful.
Yeah. Well, before we get to the coming attraction for the play, for Passion's End, you both mentioned Shakespeare and a sort of encounter that you both had. You were directing, right?
Yep.
So Shakespeare probably has been some sort of influence on you in your own lives as playwrights. But I wonder if you might talk just about some of the other influences, playwrights, screenwriters, that either of you or both of you have been very important to you.
I think I would name two. I mean, outside of Shakespeare, Shakespeare's amazing.
Sure.
The two, it's sort of sublime and ridiculous. Anton Chekhov, I love Anton Chekhov, and he wrote comparatively few plays by comparison to Shakespeare. I think he really only wrote 4 that have kind of stood the test of time that people think of as, okay, those are contributions to the great conversation, but they're excellent. And they're very kind of dedicated to a very impressionistic approach to human relationships and human dialogue. Not a lot gets resolved in them, and yet you still feel like you've gone through an emotional journey, and that really that matches my own experience a lot of the time. But then on the complete opposite end of that, the writing team for Seinfeld, I think of Seinfeld as just the paramount, such brilliant the way they can weave plots together. Their dialogue is amazing. The way that in the space of 20 minutes they can perfectly reduce a character's expressions and characteristics to like the perfect word that person would say, and you know exactly what they mean. So and obviously that's highbrow, very lowbrow,
Sure.
but ideally you'd match kind of somewhere in between, because especially kind of that bouncy dialogue is something I really like. So if you could combine those two, that's at least the ethos I'm going for when I'm writing. So
that's so funny. I wonder if there's a TAC Seinfeld connection. My wife is the biggest lover of Seinfeld.
Nice.
And it's tough for me. It's brilliant. It's brilliant, but I think that I hate the characters so much as despicable human beings. Right, exactly, right.
I can't get into it. I can't
I've
stand
tried.
it.
It doesn't work.
One of my mentors at Baylor University, who was, I think, maybe at TAC for a little bit, but Dr. Thomas Hibbs, who is the head of the honors college there, Catholic Thomist philosopher, but he wrote a book on Seinfeld called Shows About Nothing, where he really delved into the philosophy of it, but loves it, but also says it's right, like it shows the nihilism of the modern liberal society. So yeah, well, great, thanks.
Yeah, I think. Well, I was trying to think. You gave me a little time to think, and I didn't come up blank, but I realized my sense of humor was formed at a really early age by the Marx Brothers.
Sure.
That was the family movie experience, and I realized that the sort of the zany, just slightly on this side of total absurdity. There's a little bit of a plot in their better movies. They're ostensibly the good guys, but everything is an excuse for comedy. And that, I think that was really formative to me. But as far as the theater goes, I've been afraid to venture too far beyond Shakespeare, because I keep plumbing what I think is, I understand this play now. I'll talk your ear off about Romeo and Juliet, and then the next week I realize, I think there's more in this speech. I didn't quite get all of it this time.
Well, great. Well, tell us about Passion's End.
Okay.
Well, it really grew out of our joint experience of TAC, of Thomas Aquinas College, because at least the elevator pitch is, it's about a group of graduates from a small Catholic liberal arts school in Tennessee, not in California. So it's sort of away from any alignment with any one school. But it's a group of graduates reconvene to attend the funeral of one of the founders of this school. Who kind of was a larger than life figure, and all of these they've all kind of gone different ways in life. One is a priest. There's a married couple. One guy's still single, kind of just working in the area. And the goal was to kind of put these characters together, many of whom are we've seen at least the types, if not, even if they're not one person we know, like John was saying. And we wanted to see if they could put them in conversation with each other and see, okay, can they still reach each other? Despite having had several years of very different experience, is that foundation that they had at this school, this shared formation, does it provide enough common ground for them to still be able to work out their conflicts without simply yelling at each other? Does that seem like a...
Yeah, I think the only other thing I'd add is there's what I would venture to call the main character is dealing in particular with the crisis of faith, and the question of what you see each character trying to answer his crisis in their own perspective, and the goal was to provide not answers but a sort of hope of the path forward through seeing there's part of truth in this experience and that experience and that experience, but it's not, we were trying to avoid being either preachy or nihilistic, and kind of put the resolution a little beyond the end of the play, I think.
Yeah, my constant phrase throughout the writing process was, we want a hopeful but not necessarily a happy ending, which I much prefer, and I find matches more with real life, I think, for a lot of people.
Yeah. We just had 25 faculty members, my wife and I, over at the house 2 nights ago to read aloud a Flannery O'Connor short story. So I understand hopeful but happy. So, very good.
I love Flannery.
Yeah, good. Anything else about the play you want to mention, or?
It's very funny. We think it's pretty funny.
Yeah.
And it's odd how funny people found it in January. We knew there were some funny moments. Um, but it was funny to us to see how many times people laughed and what they laughed at.
Right.
With the script.
I think the other thing too is if our description has made it sound like the sort of thing that really only appeals to people who share our experiences exactly, what we've found from those who've read it who were not Catholic or who were Catholic but educated in a different tradition, was that it still spoke to them in some way. A woman came up to me after our performance in January, and she said, "I was raised Catholic, but I'm not practicing," and she said, "This place sounded like the conversations I remember hearing when I was a little girl around the dining table." She said, "People don't talk like this anymore, and I wish that they did." And I said, "Well, some people still talk like this."
Yeah.
You can imagine how happy that made us.
Yeah, absolutely. That's great. Let's turn a little bit to theater, to playwriting, and education. Adeodatus, the conference here is really centered on the renewal of Catholic education. Wonder if you might talk a little bit about how you think participation in the writing of plays, the acting, directing in plays, or just the viewing of plays might be integrated, or what the significance those are in the formation and education of the young.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I think first of all, a good Catholic education is educating the whole person, and that means training the affections, ordering the passions, and giving them not just an intellectual desire for the beautiful, but really tasting the beautiful and being moved to taste it again. And I think that's certainly viewing great plays well performed, but I find too that because I've been directing high school theater now for 7 or 8 years, and it's really wonderful when you can see there's all these material benefits. They grow in confidence, a more powerful speaking voice, all these discipline in memorizing lines, but really what you can see is they start to acquire a taste for excellence, which you can acquire in many ways through sports, through academics, but there's a taste for excellence in doing a beautiful thing and doing it in a way that people can see it and appreciate it, which you only get in the arts. And the great thing about theater, unlike the other arts, is all theater requires is a body, which everyone has.
Yeah.
You don't have to be great at drawing to act. You just have to be able to speak, and you have to be able to move, and everyone can do that. So it's a universal opportunity, I think, to become engaged in the arts, which many arts are only for those who have very particular talents.
Yeah, I think there's kind of an analogy to be made. I agree with everything John said. I'm thinking in particular, the role that theater played for me in middle and high school was, it's probably the single greatest, outside of the influence of my parents, probably the single greatest influence that made me who I am. And I think what I would say is that, kind of like by analogy with music, when you hear really a beautiful piece of music, it's giving you're learning to feel an emotion that you've never felt before in a unique way, which and it goes somewhere. It's not just, you're not just, oh, now I'm feeling this, it's you feel this, and then it leads to this other thing, and it leads to now it resolves. But that's very passive, unless you're the one producing it, like playing the music, which is valuable. Experiencing, you're just listening to music, can be like that. I think that certainly will happen when you're viewing the play, but I think especially when you're acting, it's a way, especially for young men in particular, I think it's really good for young men to be handed a difficult character and say, okay, you need to be angry in this scene. And then that anger is going to subside when you realize that you have frightened someone that you care about, right? They're like, okay. And you do it the first time, you're like, well, that was really flat. Try these things, right? And you kind of like appealing again to you. It's all about what you do with your body. We're not into method acting. I think that's kind of counterproductive. But if the idea is, okay, this is how an angry person carries themselves, and this is how an angry person sounds, and this is how an angry person looks at somebody, and as you get them to kind of embody that, they're able to they're able to then adapt to go, oh, okay, I see. And then this is then the transition that you make. And there's those great breakthrough moments where you're like, okay, they get it now. I haven't made them angry. And yet they've somehow, kind of working outside in, they've gained an insight into what it's like when when they see someone angry, when they actually encounter it, whether in a movie or in real life, they've somehow gotten an insight into, okay, I kind of know what's going on in that person's head. So it's an act of sympathetic imagination in some way, but it's very visceral. It's not discursive, which is why I think it's great as a complement to other things. But it's a really great way, I think John said, to very concretely form the affections and learn, okay, this is what it's like to feel these things and to see the effect they have on people. So you learn, okay, this is not, don't bottle these things up. These things you need to deal with these things. And hopefully, the stories themselves that you're telling also reinforce that. But solely from just the mechanics of acting, I think can be a really valuable experience for people.
That's really interesting. I tell my students when I teach Aristotle's Rhetoric and book 2 of Aristotle's Rhetoric, which is on the passions, I go, I think this is one of the most valuable things for anybody who has the pastoral care in the broadest sense for another soul, right? That before you make any argument about the good with them, you have to address where they are in terms of their passions. And it's just brilliant. And reading it is so helpful, but your point about sort of making them go through the exercise, making it incarnate, like it would seem to me that there would be a really valuable exercise in sort of coming to understand souls. Right?
And just to add one more thing about the merits of doing theater is we're in such a society in which we're so accustomed to just receive passively. Any opportunity in which you can encounter art not as, oh, that's what the people in Hollywood do, but as something that you can do in your community, and you can be a part. You can go and play Macbeth. You can put on a play every summer. I always tell my actors that you should view the performance as a gift that you're giving back to your community. And this is an opportunity to say thank you by giving them something beautiful. And you don't have that experience when you're watching a movie. That's not a gift to you. But if you go and see people you know and love on the stage saying, we're going to entertain you, we're going to move you, it's rehumanizing the art, I think, to take it away from commercialized production.
Now, you mentioned earlier the sort of, what's the word, incentive towards excellence, to being excellent when students participate in that. Now, I was thinking back to what you said earlier about how you both hold one another accountable in terms of you have to, with art, whether it's performing or fine arts, there is a product that's finished, right? And at a certain point, it has to be done, and it's going to be put before somebody. And so there are many other intellectual activities, it seems to me, where like there's not that pressure where you have to have a finished thing that you show to somebody. I was able to, when I was a student at the Abbey, get to act in plays, and I had the lead in Henry V by Shakespeare.
Nice.
But I just remember the anxiety, right? The sleepless nights, the waking up. I mean, I think every actor has the dream of it's opening night and they don't know any of their lines. I think every actor has this, right? But it was just, really this has to be good. And there are very few activities, I think, where students get that kind of incentive. So, well, thank you so much for all this. I end with a couple of questions that I ask everybody.
Okay.
So first, recommendation, especially as TAC grads, I think you'll have something here. If you have one book that everyone should read, maybe every young person, every college student, however you want to do it, so one and done. This is what is it?
Okay, I'll go first. I'm not going to stray from Shakespeare here. I would say every young person should read Romeo and Juliet, and they should try to ask themselves, I think, the two following questions. One, whose failure is responsible for the tragedy? And why has it been loved for 400 years? Because you can your answer to the first question might not work with the answer to the second question. You might find that you're blaming the wrong people, or the tragedy isn't exactly what you think it is.
I'll have to go back. I teach Shakespeare. Every spring I teach a course on Shakespeare's Henriade, and I've taught other plays throughout my time at the Abbey. I haven't gone back to Romeo and Juliet, I think, since I was in high school.
It's magnificent.
I probably have like a block in my head where I go, I read that in ninth grade at a bad public school.
Yep.
And it's one of like the juvenile plays.
Yeah.
But,
well, I teach it to 10th graders.
Yeah.
And my first question is always, because it begins with the prologue. Yeah. And the prologue tells you that Romeo and Juliet are going to die at the end.
Right.
And I always ask them, why is he telling us this?
Yeah.
Why is he telling us this? He says something else in there. He says that it's the only way to solve the feud between the families.
Yeah. Very good. Yeah.
This is tough. This is not necessarily, I have a recommendation for younger people and then a recommendation for maybe people my own age. The recommendation for younger people, I hope that's okay.
Yeah, absolutely.
Recommendation for younger people is A Wizard of Earthsea by Ursula Le Guin. Okay. It's a fantasy novel, and I love Tolkien, and I think Tolkien should be loved. But I think that A Wizard of Earthsea is, first of all, it's not 1,000 pages long. And it's part of a trilogy. The trilogy's great, but the first book in particular, I found, I read it a little older, actually, than the age that it's written for. But it still it's beautiful. The style is beautiful, and it's kind of a meditation on maturity. I mean, so many fantasy stories are coming of age stories, but this takes that very seriously, and kind of all of the events sort of externalize what it means to come of age, what it means to kind of confront the fact that you have a dark side, and what are you supposed to do with that, and kind of how you wrestle with that and realize, okay, I can't just suppress it. I have to confront it, and only in confronting it can I actually grow up. I mean, for a book that is, it has such spare, the style is beautiful but very spare. And it's short. I mean, I found it, she kind of got weird later in life. But she wrote this in like the late 60s, early 70s. She was still just a young mother. I think it's a terrific book.
Okay.
And it's a nice kind of addition to the fantasy canon that I think a lot of people know of Tolkien and Lewis. So I would recommend that for younger readers. And then for older people, my own age, anybody else, I'm going to go with Chekhov and go Uncle Vanya, which is his second of the 4 plays that I said he was famous for. It's a very sad show, but I think some of the characters, some of the speeches in there, I think part of the reason I like it so much is that it seems like, we have all these, you have hopes and dreams when you're a young person, and then you grow up and realize that life, there's the poem by Auden, forget the whole title, but there's a line in there where he says, life remains a blessing, although you cannot bless. And that, hopefully we don't all get to that point, but we all kind of experience some form of disillusionment with, life isn't all that we wanted it to be. How do you find hope in the midst of that? Can you find hope in the midst of that? And I think that Uncle Vanya, in particular, the very end of Uncle Vanya, I think is a beautiful, very poignant contribution to that question. Yeah. It also just has some amazing speeches by Chekhov is just a master. So,
well, you unwittingly provided a springboard to my last question, which is about hope. So, of course, we know ultimately our hope is in the Lord. But I want to ask both of you, what are you seeing in the world today? Developments that gives you something concrete in our moment that you're seeing that is the most cause for hope for you in a world where we're often just bombarded with bad news. What gives you hope?
Well, I've spent 9 years in Catholic education, and I've been constantly blown away with the kids that we're getting and the families we're getting. And I've thought that the pro-life movement is going to be in very good hands going forward. That we have a lot of young men and women who have been who have a deep and it seems like unshakable conviction in the sanctity of life. And they're going out there and they're having families and they're entering the workforce. And not just they're voting, but they're being a witness to others. Yeah. That's been giving me a lot of hope.
Sure.
I would echo that, but you stole what I was going to say, so I had to think of something else. Because I've also only been teaching for a year, and I've already found that it's deeply inspiring and gratifying to I learn as much, not the same kinds of things. I teach them information, but they give me hope and, inspiration. But I think in addition, what gives me hope is, I know some people who are, I'm very close with some people who were raised Catholic and aren't Catholic anymore. They've kind of gone through the crisis that we're exploring in the play and didn't necessarily come out in the end we would have liked them to come out on. But they're still very earnest seekers. And I think I just keep meeting more and more people who are just very sincerely like, something is up. The world is not the way it should be. And we need to figure out how to live and what do we have to do to improve it. And they desire this in a kind of non-strident, non-activist way, which I often think that activism on both sides can sometimes, even though it's motivated by really good, the best intentions, it can often actually obscure or make or pose an obstacle to the kind of progress you'd like to make. So, okay, well, now we actually have to agree on what can we agree on? What can we concretely do as some kind of a policy to move forward to improve things? So meeting lots of people, some of whom are Catholic, some of whom aren't, but who exhibit a real non-online open-mindedness about, okay, the world is, something's wrong with the world and we need to do something to fix it, and perhaps we could start just by talking about it. And really listening to each other. That sounds so vague and wishy-washy, but I mean, I've had very concrete experiences with that phenomenon just in the last year or two that have given me a lot of confidence that, especially as the young people that John's talking about grow up, it's like, okay, well, ideally they would meet with these new people, these younger people who don't have the faith and who are seeking, but have these ideas, hopefully that, even if we can't necessarily, even if we don't live to see those conversations blossom, I can see that at least the possibility is there that those two groups will converge and good things will hopefully come of it. So I see that as a sign of hope.
Right. So. Well, gentlemen, it's been absolutely delightful having this conversation. Before we go, is there anywhere that people who are interested in your work can follow you or have access to some of the things you're doing? Or?
We are working on that.
Okay.
Hopefully, by the time this podcast airs, we will have a website.
Okay.
That we can link you to.
Great. Yeah, we'll include that.
Thank you.
Very good.
Yeah.
Well, good. Well, thank you so much for listening to Conversatio. If you liked this, please follow and subscribe. Thanks.